Hi, first of all, thank you so much for having me. My name is Abena Motaboli, originally from Lesotho. I was born in a tiny town called Bloemfontein in South Africa. I lived in Lesotho for the first 18 years of my life and then moved to the US back in 2012. And so I went to community college out in the suburbs, and then I transferred into Columbia College, Chicago, where I graduated in 2016, and I've just been working in Chicago ever since. Been working a lot with like tea and coffee and dirt and things that are pretty ephemeral or of the earth. And a lot of that comes from just sort of like the history of tea and having that as something that was always around when I was a kid. So it would be like mom comes home at 4 o'clock and the teapot is on, or you have like visitors over and the tea kettle is on and you're using like your finest dining, like gold plates and gold cups. And then I'd have friends come over and it was always just the first thing that people would offer, as opposed to like a wine or a beer or water. It was just like, let's have some tea and we're going to talk and we're going to share stories. So I think when I first came here, I did my undergrad in fine arts and I was looking for something that reminded me of home, and I drink so much tea, like 15 cups of tea a day. I couldn't find the kind of brown that I was looking for with acrylic or oil paint. And so it just sort of worked. One day I was in studio drinking my tea and I poured it over the canvas and I was like, wow, I like that. I've learned a lot from the medium because it's almost like the way I use it. I'll pour the tea on the canvas and then I'll swish it around with some India ink and then I'll step back and then I'll play again with it. And it's sort of like this relationship that you develop over time. A lot of the time I'll have something in mind when I start, but I'm very open to the way it's going to move. It's fluid. It's just like life and it's not permanent. It's temporary. Two artists that I find really inspiring, Mbongeni Buthelezi, and he's a South African artist, so he uses a lot of like plastic and he'll use a blowtorch and create these incredible landscapes and portraits out of just like recyclable material. And then Wangechi Mutu as well, she is Kenyan born. Her work is really beautiful. There's a lot of collage, there's mylar, it's very fantastical, sort of Afrofuturist and just like very exciting to see. So I remember the first semester I was in college over here, she was having a show at Northwestern, the Block Museum, and she had this installation of these plastic balls that reminded me of the footballs people would make in the villages back home. Just like, I think thinking about the culture of making out of what you have, and like, I don't have a football, but I'm going to use this plastic over here and I'm going to make this weird looking contorted shape, but that's what I have and it's beautiful. Which sort of brings me back to like the use of tea and using dirt and coffee and things that are not considered high end or like art material, but still being able to bring the beauty out of that. A stuffy idea to have to create with things that have been around for like hundreds of years. I think there's definitely a place for everything, but to be able to just try something totally different and like push it to the maximum, and you know, I think it's so exciting. It's so exciting. Really excited about ecological art, and Robin Wall-Kimmerer has been really inspiring for me. She is a botanist, she's a scientist, she is Potawatomi indigenous, and sort of brings a lot of her ancestry into the work that she's doing. And so she talks a lot about the idea that science sort of makes plants and animals and everything else that is not human an object. So it's so clinical and so far removed from the way that we interact with humans. So she says that she sort of wants to bring into English the idea of calling these inanimate objects ki and kin, sort of giving life to the things that are around us. And she also writes The Honorable Harvest, which is sort of just like ways to live your life when you're very in touch with the earth. So there are things like never take the first, never take the last. She's just like such an incredible inspiration and just a mix of the scientific world which we are part of, but also the world that we need to get back to, which is getting back in touch with nature. I read this book. It's called The Overstory by Richard Powell, and it is incredible. It's about trees and just the way they communicate to each other, and it's set in the Midwest, so he weaves through like different people's lives that are connected to trees and different types of trees. And in it, one of the things he says is that you could ask a child right now about like 100 companies and they would know the names of all of them, but ask them if they know the name of 10 trees, and it's so difficult to name different types of trees. He also talks about a scientist, Suzanne, I'm not sure what her last name is, but she sort of came up with the idea that trees can talk to each other and trees communicate, which wasn't accepted when she brought that up to the scientific or science community way back when. And so she sort of lived in a national park as a recluse, and then years later people were like, oh, trees do talk to each other. Yes, they do. And it's through just like giant networks of mycelium, and they're so connected underground. Just the idea of like, say for example, one tree is being attacked by like a bug or a disease or a virus, it will warn all the other trees to start getting ready to protect themselves. I took a 20th century philosophy class my last semester of college, and it was incredible. I'm a lover of philosophy, but also the way like one of my teachers had described it was sort of living life with this openness that artists usually have, where you're curious about the world and you're able to navigate life in a way that is like surprising, spontaneous, and like finding out and always sort of listening to what's around you. So even just like the idea of like sitting down with a tree and listening to a tree for 10 minutes can sound so odd to someone not used to thinking in that perspective. But also just like thinking about the idea that these plants and trees have been here long before we came. They will be here long after we're gone. They're here right now, and they're on such a different timeline to the timeline of humans. I come from a culture where nature is such a part of life. It's so normal to be at one with your surroundings. And so I'm thinking a lot about the art I'm making, sustainable art, and how can I not add to the problem? Which, going back to college, a lot of what I was doing at the time was art installations with plastic, and just I had a moment where I was at like Ace Hardware thinking I'm buying like 3 giant 9x12 sheets of plastic, and this is just adding to the problem. I've been working with the Park District for around 3 years right now, and they have us all over the city, and it's been one of the most amazing jobs I've ever worked. You go to an art school and you're fed all of the stuff that you have to have, like the art speak and the conceptual artwork, and yes, I have all of that, but also it takes a lot of unlearning and relearning, and then also just having fun. So like bringing out the tea and the coffee to play with the kids, and it's okay to like splash the tea and have fun, and it doesn't have to be so heavy and carry the weight of conceptual art. That's been really challenging. Part of the beauty, I think, of the tea and of the medium is that it's ephemeral, it's temporary, it's like life, nothing is here forever. I've also been really fascinated with like dyeing. I really want to get into like natural dyes with pigments. And while I was in college, oh my gosh, I had the most amazing college experience. I feel like I got into Columbia College at a time where I knew what I wanted to do. I really just used the space to like network, and I was really interested in tea performances and making tea for people and trying to recreate an environment where you could share something with it. The whole idea was that I'd be making this Turkish black tea with cardamom. It's like sort of serving the tea, go and ask people about an intimate experience, and they'd have to share the experience, and then they'd get the tea. It didn't really go as planned. It was much more just like people were like, oh, can I have a cup of tea? I think that I would like to do something similar, or find a way to create intimate spaces for people to interact and share stories over tea. It's been challenging. Like the first 2 weeks of the pandemic, I feel like a lot of other people, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't do art. I didn't know what was going on. Yeah. I was laid off like 1,000 other people. So it was just like, all right, here we are. How do we figure this out? So I fell back on writing. The practice of journaling is so important to me in order to like flush things out and then get to like developing an art piece. And I've always used that as a base for like my sound work. Sound installations, but I never really just shared, because I think writing is such a vulnerable art form to share. I just started writing poetry and like prose and just like letting all the thoughts and emotions out, and I really want to write a book of some sort or get something published at some point. And also just finding communities. So like finding people to collaborate with, or finding friends and being like, hey, how's it going? How are you doing? Like, what are you feeling right now? I feel crazy. That one is an India ink painting I did on birchwood, and this is just sort of like following the lines of the wood itself, and then just like playing around with the wood itself, and that is mounted on MDF board. Just thinking about the beauty in nature, like bringing out the small things that are, I don't know, just it's very meditative, I'll say that.
Okay.
It's 24 by 36. I have a couple of them just like up here on the wall, the coffee ground. So there's some like coffee over here, and tea ground and coffee ground, and just like really movementy and dynamic. Another one, 24 by 36. And then I have this giant one sitting up right here. Here you are in the studio. There is a lot going on over here. But I have my more colorful works up right now. I've been thinking a lot about trees and more color, and just like, they're really just like fascinating things to explore. I was in my garden just like, oh, I don't want to burn everything down. But I was like, fire is so powerful. And just thinking about the idea of like trauma and like the holes and the burns and things that are semi-intact but still intact. I usually work on the floor, which I have like my plastic down right now, but it will start with a spill, like a single spill. So for example, like over here you see this little whoosh over there, which is what I started with. Like swirly motion, and then I'll let it dry, and then I'll come in with the ink and start pushing it around. For example, I think I started with this little section over here and just sort of went whoosh. That's the beauty in using things from home, from nature. It's like, nature is so gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling for me myself as well. I'm very excited to keep pushing the material and see what comes out of it, and how to keep developing it further.
Really appreciate this time.
Likewise, excited to see what Baroque Lifestyle is doing.
Okay.
Bye.